Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. Definitely it's a lovely day on today, and it was a lovely day on yesterday as well. As I was telling a couple of friends of mine as I called them, I heard this vicious rumor that it was November because it doesn't feel like November here in Durham, North Carolina. I'm going to find out how the weather is doing where Heather is at. I believe she's in Vermont and she's got the flying car. We'll be talking about that very shortly and all along those lines. But definitely it is some lovely weather here. And like I said, I called a couple of friends and was going like, there's this vicious rumor that it's November. I don't believe it, even though it is 2 days from Thanksgiving. And I will probably be heading to mom's house for Thanksgiving, along with my nephew and my two nephews, I should say, and my brother, and all along those lines. I'm sure that at least one cousin will be coming, and there might be others, including some, I believe their second cousin and her um, husband, if I remember correctly, their relationship to mom and everything like that. But they're usually there. So we should have a nice crowd, maybe about 8, 10 people or something like that. But we'll see how it all plays out because it is only in 2 days that it'll be Thanksgiving. But like I said, the weather doesn't feel like Thanksgiving weather. The other thing that I was joking about with mom and all along those lines is that she has some wild turkey and some wild deer in her backyard, and she had noticed that they had both had disappeared. They were kind of like in hiding, probably in maybe hibernation, or maybe they just know that it's Thanksgiving because even people like venison sometimes for Thanksgiving as well. So they might be in hiding until after the holidays. At least that's what I'm putting the excuse as. And I'm sure that they are going like, we don't want to be on the table, even though mom has already got her turkey and is ready for Thanksgiving dinner. So I'm going to find out if Heather's ready for her Thanksgiving dinner as well. Maybe she's going to fly somewhere in her flying car and everything like that. But in terms of the news, Russia bombards Kyiv even as Ukraine claims progress in peace talk. So Ukraine calls for Trump-Zelensky meeting in the U.S. this week. Russia bombards Kyiv hours after Trump voices hope for a Ukraine deal. 6 dead as Russian missiles rain down in Kyiv is what Ukrainian officials are saying. And China's Xi calls Trump in unusual move to discuss Taiwan and Ukraine. China's Xi Jinping raises future of Taiwan in call with Donald Trump. Bessent says Trump and Xi may meet 4 times next year, and return to China is not an option for Taiwan's people, is what their premier says, responding to Xi. Paris prosecutors report 4 more arrests in connection with that Louvre jewel heist. 4 more suspects have been detained over the Louvre jewel heist, and definitely a lot of folks are saying that that was a brazen heist, and there's no doubt about that. So we'll definitely be hearing more about that, particularly as those people go to trial. German Hammer Gang trial for 7 accused of extreme left violence. Antifa on trial. Members of far left group faces attempted murder charges. German court opens trial against a left wing Hammer Gang. And definitely that is something that folks are talking about as well. And China launches a spacecraft to bring 3 stranded astronauts back from space station sometime next year. So they've been up there for a while. And China completes first emergency mission to Tiangong space station. And definitely folks will hear about that as the Shenzhou 22 docks at the Tiangong space station, resolving the human spaceflight emergency. So it looks like they might be coming home at some point or another, and that will be good. An Australian senator is suspended for burqa wearing stunt in Parliament. So, Australian Senator Pauline Hanson has been suspended from Parliament for wearing a burqa in a protest. So, Australian Senate was suspended the far right leader over her disrespectful burqa stunt, and that's definitely something that people are talking about as well. And EU's top court tells Poland to recognize same sex marriages registered elsewhere in Europe. So EU court says same-sex marriage should be recognized throughout the bloc. So that is definitely something that folks are talking about in the news as well. And Israel says it killed a top Hezbollah commander in Beirut. Thousands more Hezbollah commander killed in Israeli airstrike. And definitely in the times of Israel, they're saying the Zionists should be worried. Threats, anti-U.S. chants at funeral of a Hezbollah leader, and all along those lines. And a Thai woman was found alive in a coffin after being brought in for cremation. So, a woman found alive, moving in coffin after she was taken to Buddhist temple for cremation. A woman wakes up in coffin after brother tried to donate her organs and have her cremated. So, definitely, that's not the kind of brother or relative that you want. We were actually just talking, me and Heather, about how her kids are very nice to each other and even are nice to their cousins. But I don't think that was the case in that particular case. Greta Thunberg has been fined and banned from Venice after Extinction Rebellion dyes Grand Canal green. So Greta Thunberg has been banned from Venice after dyeing the canal green. So it looks like she had that notion in terms of doing one of her protests, and now she's been banned from that very popular tourism destination. At the COP30, key outcomes agreed at the UN climate talks in Balam. That was something that was reported a couple of days ago. I think the next one is supposed to be in Turkey. And Russia's tiny advances in 2025 sold Putin on an inevitable victory in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin fears entering Russian history as the man who lost Ukraine, and that was reported about a week ago. And images from Vietnam's year of deadly wet weather. Vietnam floods, this was reported a couple of days ago, left at least 90 dead and 12 missing. So there's definitely a lot going on around the world, as we like to talk about that on a regular basis here on World Edition. Here to get to a couple of U.S. news items, and I'm going to bring in my guests. Also see if any of the regular panel are with me as well and see what they've got on their mind. But the judge tosses criminal charges against James Comey and Letitia James. So Justice Department vows to appeal the dismissal of James Comey and Letitia James cases. And Lindsay Halligan, according to Politico, is disqualified, but there are major questions about what comes next. So definitely that is something going on. And Jimmy Kimmel is touched by the Trump Mamdani bromance. So Trump's Mamdani embrace complicates Elise Stefanek's path to governor. So definitely that is something that people are talking about as well. On NBC News, Zoran Mamdani says he still believes Trump is a fascist and a despot after the White House meeting. He also talked about some of the things he saw in terms of UFC. I think there was like a coffee book or something like that he mentioned seeing, and all along those lines. So we'll see how their romance goes, or their bromance, and whether they are able to help New York or what goes on, because I think that even Trump said he would not mind living in a Mamdani style New York and everything like that. But we'll see how this all plays out. And the U.S. and Russia are holding talks on a peace plan as Zelensky warns much work still lies ahead. So that is something that folks are talking about as well. And it looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene is locked in her taxpayer-funded pension for life. So definitely some people are asking what happens next for Marjorie Taylor Greene after her exit from the Congress and all along those lines. So definitely lots going on even in our area. And at a congressional hearing, residents detailed the drama of the LA raid. So congressional Democrats holding a hearing in LA call for investigation of possible civil rights violations by federal agents. So this is all around immigration enforcement and all in that space. Winter storm watch expands into lower Michigan. And so there's definitely a winter storm watch in lower Michigan. Like I said, that's not the kind of weather that we're having as well. And drugs soaked into pages of hillbilly elegy were snuck into Ohio prison. J.D. Vance's book was used to smuggle drugs into a prison. An Ohio man has been sentenced for mailing a drug-laced book to Lorain County prison inmates. And that is something that folks will be talking about as well. So let me bring in my guest, and I've got a special guest that is involved with flying cars and all along those lines. So this is definitely something that she's doing on a regular basis. I've also got Sasha Starr who'll be joining us, as well as Rick Rosner and everything like that. Before we get started, I'm actually going to surprise Heather and everything like that. This is one of the pieces, I think it was from her flying, everything like that, and then we'll learn about what's going on. But this is one from Ron, her dad, and I think it was a 360 picture, as well as one of her in the cockpit as well. So I'm gonna learn more about this, but let's check out Ron in the cockpit. also see Heather. She does a flyover, and then we'll learn how she got into this whole flying car business and everything like that. So, Heather, I learned about you when you were here in North Carolina, in Northampton County, and I think one of our local TV stations covered you and all along those lines. So then I reached out to you and said it would be a great story for Pod TV and all along those lines and everything like that. So I was just wondering, how did you get involved in this whole flying car business? Because I understand there's only a few flying cars around, and I did grow up on the Jetsons. So we joked here on the other shows about Rosie and Rosie the robot and how maybe we're with AI getting to Rosie, but there was also a lot of those flying cars that people remember from the Jetsons as well. So how did you get into this whole space? Because I understand there's only a few flying cars in the country, maybe in the world.
Well, the Jetsons is a really good way to start because my father is actually my flying partner. And so we fly together and everybody calls us the real world Jetsons. So anyway, he's a pilot, has been a pilot for 50 years. And I decided to get my pilot's license when I got much older. Most people do it when they're like in their 20s, but I waited until way later in life. And he got infatuated with this thing called the black fly, and he was following it around. So every time this guy Marcus Lang, the inventor, would show up at a trade show, Oshkosh was the trade show that he was doing, my dad would say, "Come on, let's go to Oshkosh. Let's go check it out. Let's go see it." And we'd stand on the sidelines and wait for them to fly. And they didn't fly year after year after year. So we made shirts. We said future black fly pilot, future black fly owner. We made hats with big propellers on them that looked like a black fly. And we led the parade of the black fly. And then finally it flew. And I remember standing by Marcus Lang on the fence, watching the black fly the first time that it flew publicly and thinking, you know, this is the advent of the flying car. This is actually the birth of the Jetsons in the real world. So, yeah, so I feel lucky. So they finally allowed us to buy one after trailing them around and being their biggest fans and biggest stalkers for years. They finally said, we're going to sell just a handful, just 5 to a few people in America. And you guys have been selected as the first people to own this. And so my dad and I became owners.
And do you think that that's going to be something that'll be common where more and more people will be having their own cars and everything like that? Because I think that I read somewhere, it might have even been on that TV coverage, that I remember that there was this notion that you didn't necessarily need to have a license to fly a plane. I mean, most people have a license and everything like that, but there's this notion that you can fly without having a driver's license and everything like that.
You could be a pilot of a flying car. It takes about 2 weeks of training. So you go through maybe 3 days in the simulator and you have to pass some simulator tests. And then you get in the cockpit. And the first time, it's a single seater. So the first time you get in the cockpit, there's no safety net. There's no one controlling the vehicle. You have to be on your game and you have to do everything right from the first time forwards. And so it's a really good preparation to sit on that simulator for a few days and then get into the cockpit. So it's a nice progression. You don't need a pilot's license. It only takes maybe 3 days in the simulator and then another 3 days in the skies where you're really trying to conquer a few maneuvers. So there's a hover flight, Then there's a cruise flight where you actually cruise around in a circle, and then some, really good emergency type response activities that we do just to be prepared for any emergency. So
And what kind of simulated environments do you go in, even in the simulator? A friend of mine, I work at a cultural arts center, and there was a time, I want to say maybe a couple of years ago, it was definitely, I think um, he took it back to his house, and I think he's trying to donate it to a university, and I'm not sure where the status of that is and everything right now. But I know he had a flight simulator, and he was training young kids in his aeroliner, and there was definitely some mountain scenery. I think there was some beach scenery. There was a couple of other ways of the simulated environments that you would fly over. So I was just wondering what kind of simulated environments did you fly over?
well, it actually uses Google Maps imagery, which is interesting. So you put on the 3D glasses. If you've ever done, have you ever done a flyover in 3D of Google? You can actually take a flight from point A to point B and see all the terrain that you go through. That's very similar to how the simulator is. So you put on these 3D glasses and you're in this chair that pitches you backwards and forwards and gives you kind of that feeling of rocking. And you literally fly through these 3D environments that are pictorial. So it's not drawn images. It's done with actual Google satellite images that are mapped, pictorial images that are mapped over the terrain. And so when you fly, let's say you were just looking outside, and where I am, I can see a fence line, I can see trees, I can see grass, I can see a road. So in Google Maps, you can see all those things, and you can see them in the simulator. And as you fly, you're going through all of those things. Well, when you get in the cockpit for the first time and you don't have the 3D glasses on anymore, and you're just surrounded by this 360 canopy, right? Well, 180. And you can see everything exactly like it was in the simulator. So the fence lines are the same, and the rocks are the same, and the grassland is the same. So you feel very much at home, and that transition's super easy. So.
Okay. So, yeah, I was also curious because I'm hearing that some people are thinking that this could be the wave of the future. I know that there was a time that people were very much getting into Teslas, which is the electric cars and everything like that. Of course, there are not probably enough charging stations around the world, even though there are some that are out there. But do you think that this is going to be the next iteration? Will we be seeing more people with flying cars, or is this just going to be a limited amount of people, or will this be like we went from the regular car to the electric car to the flying car?
Well, think about horse and buggy days, right? We're in the horse and buggy days for the flying car. There was a horse and buggy, and then there was a horseless carriage, right? The flying car is the next horseless carriage. So it's in my mind, it's like a final frontier. Think about space. You go to space and it's this big final frontier, and only a few people can go and only a few people get the pass. Well, right now, piloting in the air is the bastion of people with a near master's degree. You have to have this pilot's license, right, to go up into the skies. Well, that's a limiter for almost everyone in America to be able to go through the cost, the time, the expense, and then you have kids, and then you don't have enough time to finish your license. So there's this horde of people out there who have progressed to some degree towards their pilot's license, but then they flushed out because they either didn't have the time, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the wherewithal to withstand the amount of rigor and the amount of studying that was required. There's a legal book this big, right? So all of that leads up to barriers to entry. So what's happened is the barriers to entry are getting much lower. Now the barriers to entry are very low. So you have 2 weeks of training. You have a little bit of a course that you have to go through to pass, which is about equivalent to getting your driver's license. Well, everyone can do that. Everyone who has a driver's license, who can, with a little bit of manual dexterity, enough to master driving a car, can actually master driving a flying car. And the barriers aren't that high. And it's because the technology has progressed to a point where it's taking the mechanics of flying the vehicle out of the equation. So now flying for me in a flying car is telling it where to go. forwards, backwards, left, right. And the actual how that happens, that's the computer's job. So the computer controller is sitting behind me in a box back here, and there's three computers back there, and it's basically telling that airplane how to accomplish forwards and backwards. I don't have to look at a whole dashboard of meters and monitors and figure out what to do next and how to adjust. So the
Now the other
computer
thing,
does the hard part.
yeah.
No.
Now, the other thing that I found fascinating is there was a time I think that a lot of our airplane pilots came from the military. At least that's the impression that I got and everything like that. But you were telling me that you had gone through, I think, civil patrol and things like that, but you weren't necessarily military trained, whereas some of our pilots, including some of our women pilots in the past, have been military trained. So how was that? How was that whole situation? Because it doesn't seem like it's like you have to go to, say, the Air Force. I know my dad was in the Air Force and everything like that. It doesn't seem like you
Well,
need to be in the Air Force in order to become a pilot. And I've also heard that there's a severe shortage of pilots in the country in general and everything.
yeah, well, we've just gone through a big pilot shortfall. So there's a sneaky back door into the military called the Civil Air Patrol, which is wonderful. It's basically a civilian air force that's there at the beck and call of the military to do things like it used to be for search and rescue. Now it does a lot of traffic monitoring. We do missions like in the Civil Air Patrol. If you're a private citizen with an aircraft, you can do stuff like invading federal airspace. We had this one incredible day where they said, okay, you're going to invade joint base Andrews. We invaded what used to be called Andrews Air Force Base. There, we invaded their airspace with our little Cessna, right? And the F-16s had to intercept us. And so they came right up on our wing and ushered us out of this restricted airspace. And it was all known. It was all, the mission was for them to find us. And they knew what day we would be sort of accidentally flying into their airspace. So the Civil Air Patrol does these missions, which help us stay secure, which help us do search and rescue, all of that. So I joined the Civil Air Patrol as a way to get on Dover Air Force Base to get a base pass, because that's where all the meetings were held. Once I had the base pass, I could join the Aero Club where they train, and all those military trainers, they're fantastic. They are the best trainers I've worked with in my entire, I've worked with probably 4 different pilot schools over the course of getting my license. And I'll tell you what, the Air Force was the last one I worked with, because they boom, boom, boom. They made sure I got my pilot's license in a reasonable amount of time. And it was just march forward. Here's what you need to do. Take no prisoners. It was wonderful. They're fantastic.
Before I bring in some of our regular panelists and regular guests and everything like that, and I do see Nick's here, who's one of the founders. He was here yesterday too. I don't know if he's going to jump on screen or not, and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, how did you feel that we are in terms of readiness and everything like that? Because you had to train with the military, and that's one of the things I hear people sometimes say is that they're wondering whether we are ready enough in terms of being prepared for any sort of need for airplane pilots and flights and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So how prepared do you, from your own training, how do you feel we are doing in terms of
From
readiness?
Well, from my training, the military is very ready. I don't, they have a regimen, they follow it, they have protocols. I don't see any issue there. But society, if we take that question and we apply it to the flying car for society, is society ready for the flying car? That's a really good question. Are the regulations ready? Is the technology ready? Is society ready? Are you ready to look up into the skies and see a flying car overhead and for that to be you? There's this fantastic thing that happens when we fly into a location for the first time. People look up and they have stars in their eyes and they say, oh, that could be me. And it's kind of the first time that everybody sees themselves in the pilot seat. Like, this is a flying car. I could do this. That's a major realization. That's a major shift. So there's a readiness there that is a mental shift that is a societal shift that's going to go through.
So
Speaking
speaking of readiness, they're talking flying taxis for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Is that a possibility? Is that too ambitious?
It's a very real possibility, but that is dependent upon government regulation. Okay, so you're looking at a flying taxi, you have to have more than one person in the vehicle. So if you have more than one person in the vehicle, by the current regulations, you automatically must have a pilot's license to pilot that vehicle. So the flying taxi is not an autonomous thing. There has to be a pilot in the pilot seat with 1, 2, 3, extra seats there that will carry the people to their destination. So the flying taxi is a proposition that requires a pilot by the current regulations. Otherwise, the regulations are going to need to shift to support that, and the technology.
So this thing, you don't need a runway. You can just take off from a standing start.
Yeah, it goes straight up in the air. So it's what's called an eVTOL, which is geek speak for it goes straight up in the air, vertical takeoff and landing. So I hit the gas, which basically thumb up, and it goes whoop straight up into the air, and it flies up into the air, and then I joystick forward, and it starts picking up speed and levels out, and then I'm in cruise mode. Boom. So
what's your flight radius? And also, you can't just land at Walmart, because I assume the wind from the fans would tear up all the other cars with debris and stuff.
Well, there's a couple issues. One is noise abatement. One is airspace restrictions. One is, do you have permission to land? My biggest barrier right now with going to Walmart is that I need Walmart to give me permission to land in their parking lot, right? And then the parking lot needs to be clear. There can't be children running into the airspace when I'm landing this 8 propeller vehicle down, into the Walmart parking lot. So it's very much a factor of real estate more than anything, that I need safe haven to put this thing down. It only requires maybe, I'll call it 50 feet of safe landing area around me, but I need permission from the landowner to land there. So,
well, speaking of real estate, it seems to me that, from what I understood, even when you were in rural North Carolina and everything like that, is that even some of these like efforts to show people what's going on with the flying car, you're actually in wide open space, because that's one of the things I know about Northampton, is that it's very much a country town and everything like that. So it's not like you're going to do these demonstrations for the most part. I'm thinking in, say, and if I'm here in North Carolina, Charlotte or Greensboro, it's probably going to be a more rural kind of town and everything like that. Or are you doing them in big cities?
I need 50 feet to land. Maybe 100 if there's people around. I want to push the people back at least 100 feet to stay back. So I need that amount of space. That's not much, honestly. I don't need a mile of wide open field. We had that in North Carolina. It was wonderful. It's absolutely, we were landed on a racetrack, and we had tons of space and tons of separation, 200 feet of separation between us and the people. And that's a real joy to be able to land in something like that. But the plausibility of making this real and going across the nation, going from place to place, parking lot to parking lot, we actually send a scout car out in advance to scout the territory, make sure we have permission to land, and make sure we have space and safe haven to land. So
I guess the reason I was thinking it needed to be in a wider space and everything was because I know people that have trained in parachute drops and skydiving. I, for one, have said that I've even had an ex-girlfriend that was trying to get me to skydive, and I was like, I'm perfectly fine with flying in a plane to go from point A to point B. I'm not trying to fall out of a plane. That's just me. Other people like me.
Well, we don't want trees. We don't want trees around, and wires. Trees and wires are nemesis, right? Because you can easily fly into them. So
are hospitals eventually, every hospital is going to have one of these, so people don't die in traffic in an emergency? Like, getting sick, it seems. Also, you've got 8 fans. How many can you lose and stay in the air?
Well, The first question, hospitals, absolutely. Hospitals already have helipads, and we can
Right.
land on helipads. One of the biggest use cases of this is for EMS, and there's a lot of effort to push this into EMS because it's such a easy vehicle to go into remote places. So now how many motors I can lose? I have 8 motors. I only need 6 to fly. I have 3 computers, 3 computer brains inside. I only need 1 to fly, so I can lose 2. I have 2 joysticks. I only need 1 to fly, so I pick my joystick. So that's how safety is accomplished with the flying car. It's safety through redundancy.
So it seems like Cessnas always drop out of the sky. They have engine failure, and then they have to land on a golf course. This seems like when it's developed technology, it'll be more reliable.
Well, this vehicle is actually somewhere between a safety threshold of motorcycle and car. So it's somewhere in the middle. Planes don't generally drop out of the sky when they lose a motor or they lose an engine. They have something called glide path where they can glide down and safely land. As long as there's a cornfield or a patch of grass, they can land. But I have a ballistic parachute in my flying car. So if I get nervous and I feel like, ooh, I got to land quickly, I can pull the parachute as long as I'm over about 150 to 200 feet. I can pull that parachute and I'll just float down like a Christmas present.
Now, hold on a second, Rick, because I mentioned earlier about your having those twins and everything like that, adult twins and everything like that. But we have a regular panelist. He's not here today, but he's very much into the video game world and everything like that. So how much is that kind of training good for people that are thinking about getting into this flying car business and everything like that? Because I know Jacoby, when he's here, he's very much an advocate for the video game world and everything like that. So I don't know if you and your kids were into video games when they were younger. I understand that they're adults now, but
yeah, absolutely. The video game training is a fantastic training for this because when I'm using my joystick, I'm just telling it where to go. It's like driving your character on a video game, forwards, backwards, up, down, left, right. Very simple flight controls and very similar to a helicopter. So if you're doing a helicopter simulation or a stick and rudder, old school, antique plane with a stick and rudder, that sort of motion is how I fly my flying car in this particular model. So yeah, bring it on. Video games are a good trainer for the future.
Well, speaking of good training for the future, I know that in the wars that have been going on, whether that's in Israel or in Ukraine, a lot of people have been talking about the efficiency of drones in their attack and everything like that. So what's the difference between a flying car and a drone, or are they in the same family and everything?
Well, that's a great question. As soon as you put a human in a drone, it is no longer a drone. So that's the first difference, is that we're talking about humans and manned flight. Human manned flight takes lots of years of testing and safety protocols and all kinds of things. With a drone, you can fly it and crash it and build another drone and fly that one and crash it too. And that's perfectly okay. It's unmanned. So that's the primary difference between a flying car and a drone. It's a completely different mental space. So if I'm going to get into an aircraft, I think about my personal safety. I think about, how do I get home if I land somewhere unexpectedly? I think of, I have all these considerations to take into play. When I fly a drone, I just think, is my battery power full? That's, up and down. As long as I have enough battery, I can go flying my drone, and that's okay. So there's many more considerations that you need to be situationally aware of. So.
Any idea what the price point might be when these become commercially available?
Sure. They are commercially available. It's this particular flying car, the Pivotal Blackfly, is $190,000. It has a 25-mile range. So I can go 25 miles, 25 minutes. Goes about 60 miles an hour, a little bit more, but that is controlled by a governor. In other words, there's a thing in the computer that makes it go less fast. This vehicle actually probably sit really nicely around 90 or 100 miles an hour. But because there's a regulation, a government regulation, we pull back the power in order to fly slower. So,
Well, coming back to the price point, do you think that it will drop? Because I do know that there was a time that a lot of vehicles were more expensive than they are now. Shucks, planes used to be more expensive than they are
yeah.
now and everything. So, at what point do you think that we will see the price become more affordable, say, for somebody that's in the middle class? Maybe not somebody that's in the poverty class, but definitely somebody that's in
Well,
the middle class.
it has to get more wide scale. Okay, so there are 5 flying cars delivered by Pivotal. There are now 2 flying cars that were delivered by another company called Jetsons. So there's 7 in America right now. There's a few more that were delivered to the military, right? The price point of technology, as it becomes more commonplace and as those numbers grow, 2026 will be a new manufacturing run, new deliveries, all of that. We'll see more and more flying cars take to the airwaves. You'll have things like insurance. So right now, it's virtually impossible to get aircraft insurance on a flying car because there's only 7 in America and there's no actuarial tables to assess the risk. So no one will insure us except for these exceptional insurance companies, which do unusual use cases. So that's the only way to get insurance right now. But as soon as there's 1,000 flying cars or 2,000 flying cars, the insurance infrastructure will mature. The regulations will mature. The price point of technology will come down. I think about my first laptop. My first laptop was $3,500 and it weighed about 10 pounds. It was a bit like a brick, right? And then 12 months later, I could get the same thing for $2,000 and it weighed half as much. And now I can get the same thing for, a few hundred on refurbished and it weighs almost nothing. So,
Yeah, but really quickly, I did mention Jatovia. Jatovia, I asked her about the training and video games, how that can help with the flying car, and she did say that that has helped her in the past and everything like that. So she was saying that that even helped her in her getting this whole flying car and everything like that. And we've also got Dr. Tasha from Canada and Dr. Sharif, who's in Bangladesh. So you mentioned that there are 7 in the U.S. How many of these are in the world and everything? Or is it more prominent in other parts of the world? I guess is what I'm really asking.
oh, that's a great question. It's interesting. The flying cars cannot be adopted in certain markets because of what we call FAA regulations. So in America, FAA regulations are such that a flying car must require no pilot's license, single seater, 62 miles an hour, right? These are the regulations that have to be met in order for every man to be able to apply to become a flying car pilot. Well, if you go to China, those regulations are much looser. So you go to China and you'll see there's a company called Xpeng that has their own version of the flying car, and they have a much higher penetration in the hundreds, maybe even more by now, because their regulations allow for 2-seaters for the same thing. And so just that simple notion, the ability to fly has allowed them, the looser regulations has allowed their market and their technology to mature into the market much more rapidly than we have. What's going to happen is backwards. That's going to put pressure on the US to change the regulations or to loosen the regulations to make this happen. So things like autopilot, when that becomes possible in the air, then you'll see the regulations loosening up. So in Italy, to fly the Jetson 1, the Jetson 1 is another flying car that's delivered the 2 units to the US right now. Well, they have to have a helicopter license in Italy in order to fly their flying car in Italy. So they have tighter regulations, but they come to America and now they can sell to the common man. And so it just depends on what country you're sitting in and where their regulations are, how quickly or how rapidly the adoption can take place.
Now I've got an abstract question. I did see your hand, Rick, and everything, but I do have an abstract question. I was reading earlier today, and fortunately, pilot is not on this list. But the Department of Education is naming certain jobs that they're considering to be professional and everything like that. And ironically, nurses were not one of them. Architects were not one of them. Physical therapists were not one of them. I do think pilots were still listed as professional and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on that, because I did see that list and everything. And I was just curious as to whether this is considered a professional field, because I know even sometimes Nick has teased, because he's very much in hopefully a joint indicated conversation about education and how certain jobs aren't as practical as others. Like, I don't know that he feels that archaeology is all that practical, but I'm thinking, what is your thoughts about the practicality of being a pilot and everything like that?
Being a pilot will always be a professional thing, because a commercial pilot flies people around. You need a license to do that. My vehicle, my flying car, is a single seater, so I'm only flying myself around. I'm only flying in uncontrolled airspace, which is 95% of America, but it's remote airspace. I'm not flying downtown Dallas, right? I'm not flying downtown New York City, because that airspace is restricted. And so, if I, as a flying car pilot, if I didn't have a pilot's license, I don't want someone without a pilot's license flying into a place where there's heavy population, where they can put someone at risk. So we have to consider the safety factors when we consider the profession. The profession is a direct result of the safety of the industry. So if you want to fly into Dallas, or you want to fly into these heavily populated areas, until that technology matures to get me there safely without touching anything, well, it needs to be the bastion of the schooled pilot.
So will the flight, when this thing becomes more widely available, will the flight computers make them kind of idiot and jerk proof? Like, when you think about the price point, people who can afford 190K, some of those people are idiots. And will the computers be able to stop them from buzzing through Dallas and then peeking into windows and doing ridiculous stuff?
Well, sure, but think about when you get behind the wheel of your car, you can drive it into a tree if you want to. Yeah. You can drive it off the road. You can create a risk for other people if you need to. There's the same level of responsibility with flight. You have to be able to have a certain level of responsibility, a certain level of respect, a certain level of safety, and you have to be aware of these things. So that's the training program that the manufacturer puts you through. And that's the protocols that you need to follow when you fly a flying car. So
I guess the point that Rick is trying to get to and everything along those lines, I'm sorry, Heather, and everything, is if you think about space travel and everything like that, there is a number of people that are quite well off, that they can afford to go in those planes and everything like that. I mean, it's very easy for Elon Musk to fly his spacecraft. Now, he hasn't had that much success, because quite a few of them have also blown up and everything like that. So I'm just wondering
your take
on that, because that seems to be one of the issues that I think Rick was kind of alluded to, is that sometimes people that are quite wealthy may not always have the best common sense.
Yeah, sure. And in that case, they're going to wind up being passengers, and they aren't going to be certified by the manufacturer. I mean, if you have the manufacturers, more than anyone, don't want any incidents to happen by people who are not responsible or respectful for the technology. So yeah, I mean, those people do exist, and eventually there will be autopilot. But in the early days, we have a responsibility to keep the car on the road. We have a responsibility to keep the flying car out of the trees and out of the wires, and that responsibility is on the driver. And so, in the early days, it is less regulation and less automation, and also more cost. And as time goes by, like all technology, that cost will fall. Those automated elements will become idiot-proof, will become easy, will become manageable for every man, and it will then expand to fit the box, right? Once every man can do it, once autopilot exists in the air, then you'll see, once those costs are down, you will see a major expansion in flying cars. Now, this is the first one. This is the very first flying car in the nation that we have our hands on. Well, there's only 5, maybe 7, right? So we're breaking the ground. It's the Wild West. We're inventing the rules as we go, following the guidelines that we have. But
speaking of the rules as you go and everything like that, just really quickly, I'm a big fan, and some people on this network know that, of nature. I follow the Merlin app and all along those lines to see what birds are out there and everything like that. So, how much are you having to pay attention to the rest of nature when you're out there flying? Because I mean, one of the other things that we've heard about in uh, airplanes, regular airplanes, is they don't always pay attention as much as they should to the rest of the wildlife out there. And there have been incidences where birds have caused wrecks, or there have been things like that. So I just wondered, how much do you have to get trained in understanding that you're not alone in the air?
Yeah, we're not alone. There's birds, there's wires, there's all sorts of obstacles, and all of them present a problem for airplanes, for flying cars, for anything that takes to the air. We have the safety measure of the ballistic parachute. So if I was to, enter a bird strike and I felt like, oh no, more than 6 motors have been demolished by the birds and I can't make it to the ground, I'll pull my parachute and float down. You be aware of birds. I had an incredible experience, my very first cruise lap. So there's the flying car that I fly, the Black Fly, has two flight modes. So there's hover mode where you're pitched backwards and you're upside down and you're just hanging out in the air and you're kind of looking around almost upside down, staring straight at the sky. That's called hover mode. And then there's cruise mode where you're tooling along at a clip, 60 miles an hour. Well, the first time I went into cruise mode, there was a red-tailed hawk that parked itself right off my wing. And it was absolutely magical. I flew around the cruise lap and this hawk flew with me all the way along and then dashed off before I hit the ground, before I came down. And I was worried at first, but the birds don't want to be hit any more than I want to hit the birds. So being that this vehicle goes so slow, and most birds can keep up and outfly it, as that bird did sitting off my wing.
I think Dr. Sharif had a question for you as well. I saw his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting sessions. Thank you organizing these sessions. And I just read some article about you from LinkedIn and others. This is very interesting projects you have. As I am working with some largest business incubations in South Asia, I work with Chittagong Business Incubation in South Asia. I work with IIT, some business incubations, and some largest investment corporations. So your projects, honestly speaking, is a very visionary and very, very helpful for South Asian some cities, especially where we develop from some urban plan and all of the things. And we have highly density populated country. So I think 2 days ago, Mark Wayne asked me that, what's your thought? I said, if I find this kind of solution, definitely I'm going to invite them first in Dhaka, because we have highly density populated country. People has traffic and all of the things. You have amazing projects. So if from my World Talent Economic Forum institutions, if we want to collaborate with you for South Asian markets for research and innovations and growing your company, do you have any plan, or is it possible practically? And what's your thoughts about this Asia Pacific market? Definitely, there are a lot of smart city project is happening. It may help to grow your company very fast.
Yeah, well, I don't work for the manufacturers, so I'm a pilot. And my group of pilots, we're all independent flyers. So I have a special ed teacher, I have a smoke jumper, I have myself, I'm a tour manager for large events. So I don't work for the manufacturer, but I work with the manufacturers. So they are the ones that would take the jump or take the leap into the various markets. There is an interesting concept in pilotage where you require a pilot's license of the air corridor. So they have one of these over Disneyland. There's like a corridor that's been carved out of the controlled airspace, which is like a freeway in the sky, where you can fly through it without the typical restrictions that you would have in what's called the Class Bravo or the restricted airspace. This concept of air corridors, I believe, is going to become a foundation of city travel eventually. We will have a network of these freeways in the sky, of these air corridors where flying cars will go through the air corridors. We'll also have maybe LiDAR or magnetic repulsion. Imagine a magnet turned backwards and it repulses that concept or that idea, with flying cars so that they can't get close or near to each other to travel down a corridor. So things like this technology will mature. It will happen through LiDAR. It might happen through GPS. It might happen through a bunch of different things, but those types of technologies, the air corridor, the magnetic repulsion, those types of things will.
How does the energy cost per mile compare to cars?
Oh, so low, so low. I barely spend anything on energy. So I did a recharge of my flying car using a Ford Lightning. So a Ford Lightning has what's called a V2L jack in the back where I could plug my flying car into. I did a landing in a field, pulled up the Ford Lightning, and I plugged in and recharged. I went from 20% to 80%. Do you know how many miles of capacity came off that Ford Lightning? Can you guess?
Nope.
7 miles. I used 7 miles of power of what would have cost the Ford Lightning to go 7 miles to recharge my flying car to be able to take the next, 10-minute flight to get back home. So
you had a question?
I've got actually two questions, but I'll start off with the first one.
Okay.
Sorry for popping in and everything. The first one is, how will 3D printing affect the whole flying car industry that you're piloting, essentially?
Yeah, 3D printing. 3D printing is incredible, and there's a whole parts industry cropping up around 3D printing. But that's in the hands of the manufacturers. The manufacturer that made my flying car, it was invented by the inventor of memory foam, which is interesting. Imagine a piece of foam core with carbon fiber, and foam in the middle, some sort of carbon foam in the center of it. It's very strong, right? And then they made connectors out of that same material, which would turn sideways and would be very light. Not 3D printed, but it's a function of my technology is foam. So that's what I'm using to create these connectors. Now, as time goes by, all of that changes. It just depends on where the manufacturer is and capacities as well. When you look at a manufacturing run, to do something on a 3D printer is a time-consuming event. And so if you're doing a high-scale manufacturing run, maybe that's not the best choice. But certainly at this stage where we have prototypes, where we have pre-production vehicles, those types of things, 3D printing can come into play. So
then my follow-up question, which is kind of like what Dr. Sharif did when he was talking about the World Economic Forum. So I actually have an expo that I'm putting together for next year in Durham, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. How would one reach out to yourself to be a featured presenter and so on and so forth? Because the expo that I'm putting together is called Future Fest Connect. Yeah. And what we're doing is looking at all the future technologies and a way to, not only in the game development side, because since you had mentioned that games were not essential, but played a role in terms of learning flying cars, but it's just talking about how to navigate a world and utilizing human technology rather than focusing so heavily on AI technology. So how would one go about having you, the whole group, or your whole group, including the flying car, as a display at the event? How would one get in contact with you to do that?
Yeah, just reach out. thesortour.com, thesortour@gmail.com is my email address. So the SOARTOUR. So our group of pilots, we have technicians, we have pilots, we have special ed teacher, we have all sorts of people with all sorts of crazy different backgrounds who make up the pilot team. So I've got a team of 8 different pilots who come together. 3 of us will come for this expo, 5 of us will come for that expo. We bring the flying cars in, we can do flying car demos. we need to have landowner permission. So that's your first battle, is to get us permission to fly and get us a place where they say, sure, you can fly. Okay, safety. And then we bring in the flying cars, and we bring in the people, and we can run seminars, we can run keynotes, we can run, breakouts, whatever you need.
Sounds good and everything like that. So I appreciate that. I was going to actually ask something.
That'd be perfect. Because this is going to be huge for Durham, North Carolina. Because that's the goal, is to display and have showcase what we can, especially on the flying cars. Because I think everybody would be just astounded at the technology around it. And honestly, your descriptions and talk today, it'd be perfect. It's a perfect fit.
I'll tell you what, everyone who comes and sits in that cockpit has an epiphany moment, and it is fantastic to watch. We just did the Electrify Expo in Dallas, and we probably had 1,000 people sit in that seat. I don't know how many people over the course of the days of the expo. It was nonstop, morning to night, people sitting in that seat. And every person who sat in that seat had this, oh my gosh, this is now. This is real. They walk up and they say, is this the future? And I say, yeah, but it's also the now. It's here. It's now. It's happening. We're flying. There are 1,000 flights on this vehicle alone that's sitting right here. So there is this incredible epiphany that happens when people sit in the cockpit, grab that joystick, and realize they can go forwards, backwards, up, down, left, right. It's not rocket science, right? This is a little bit more in the video game realm. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And
that's perfect.
We've got to get ready to go to our Ukraine-Russia show that Sasha does and everything like that. And I think he's waiting for some of his guests to join. But if they don't join, we might have to do like we did last time, and Ricky might have to join him as well as Nick. And hopefully Nick can put the link in there and can put the whole way that he can be found and everything like that. Or Sasha can do it, but I think I still got Sasha in the room and everything like that. But yeah, you can definitely join him. I'm sure he would appreciate it. But just really quickly, Heather, I know we're going to have more of this conversation on the online dinner party and everything like that tomorrow and everything like that. But if you can share with folks how you can be reached and everything like that. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I know that in addition to working at Pod TV, I'm an event planner, so I'm already thinking of tons of events like Jatobi that we might want to get you at and everything like that.
Yeah, we're doing a tour across country. These pilots are the first people to have a flying car in the nation, and they're all under the SOAR Tour. So if you want the SOAR Tour to come to your event, go to thesoartour.com and contact me, thesoartour@gmail.com, and I will see about making that happen. So yeah, we're looking for events to go to. We're looking for sponsors. We're looking for, anything we can find to make this possible, to arrive in another city and make people realize that this is the now. Every city we go to, we're on the news everywhere. So it's the Jetsons. We're here. It's happening. So
fascinating, I would say.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Soartour.com. All right. Well, hopefully we'll have you back on some of these programs, either in Asia or where I'm at in Spain or somewhere else around the world. And with that, we'd like to thank you for coming to World Edition. I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow. Hopefully we'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.